Welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And my name is Mick, and I'm also an alcoholic, serving as your secretary today. Please join us for a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting.
And Hazel is going to read the preamble for us.
Yeah, I'm Hazel and I'm an alcoholic. The preamble, AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you for letting me do service.
Thank you, Hazel. And a very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat now is disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host. If you feel the meeting security is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so that they can check it out.
And that's it, folks. As you know, this is our old timers meeting. This evening we've Jonathan coming in from the US, celebrating 37 years, I think, this year.
39.
39 years. My apologies for selling you short. 39 years. Well done, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
You
you.
got 40, 50 minutes, whatever suits yourself. Take it away.
Okay. My name is Jonathan. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I want to thank you for inviting me to your group. I just want to start off by saying I have alcoholism. And before I came in, the mental, the spiritual, and the physical. You see, I had the spiritual down pat before I came in. God was worked for me. He was I would ask him and tell him what I needed and what I wanted him to do. And the physical part, I was always, when I took that first drink, I was gone. But in between that time, I was insane. And that was the mental part of this disease. And the insanity that alcoholism caused for me, it's only explainable if you're familiar with alcoholism, what it can do to people, because we all have our stories. And, I was really out of it from the time I was a kid. I had two very addictive parents who were abusive, and that just put gasoline on the fire that I was going through. And I was wondering where all you were when I was growing up, because I could have probably used this program early on. As soon as I got to be 10 or 11 or 12, I started taking drinks for my parents when they had parties, Seagram 7 and 7. And I started taking booze from my father's bar, a bottle of Seagram 7. And my father, one time he had a party and they said to him, "Lee, why are you watering down your drinks?" He was a very heavy pourer. And he figured it out that I was drinking his booze. Now, my father was a great enabler. He said, "Listen, you can't touch the booze. I'm going to give you your own bottle. You can't fill them up with water," because I was filling up his booze bottles with water. And I was a pretty young kid when I was doing that. And then when I got enough to go to the parties at 13 and 14, hide outside of the, all the big guys would pull up and they would go in to get their stuff. And we'd be out there going, "We'll buy you your beer. Will you get us something?" And the order would go in. Somebody would want Tango. Somebody would want beer. "What do you want?" "I want Southern Comfort." And the guy would look at me like, "Southern Comfort? Do you even know what that is?" And I would say in my great arrogant way, "Shut up, I'm buying you your booze. Get me a half a pint of Southern Comfort." The reason I liked that was because it took me totally away from myself. It took me out of myself quickly. You see, I couldn't stay inside of myself. I could not sip. I could not do. I didn't want to get high. I wanted to get obliterated. And that's why I chose Southern Comfort. Somebody had given me that, and that really got me. And it was sweet too, which was bad enough because you suffered badly. And I was only a kid, really. And as soon as I could get away from my family, I was off to the races. I ended up in Florida And I got involved with all the wrong people. That's the insanity of this disease. Now, I will say, I come from a little town called Westchester. It's a very affluent. My father was an optometrist, a doctor. I wasn't brought up in crime. Although my parents were abusive and drug addicts, it was definitely totally different from where I went. And I'm in Florida, and at that time, if anyone has seen Scarface, it was where the people went down and took a cottage, and it was, not built up. And I was down there, it was a Wild West show. And of course, I fell in with the people because I'm going to keep, this is AA, but um, in New York, the penalty for having a marijuana was 20 years, and you couldn't. So everybody came to Florida, and that's the business I got into down there. And it was safe. I'd go to the beach every day. I was supposed to be in school, and it just got worse. And then they said to me, you know, you have it made down here. I said, well, let me go up to New York and test the waters up there. They go, what are you, crazy? They'll put you in jail for life. But no, I'm an alcoholic. I have alcoholism. I can do anything I want. They're not going to catch me. They're not going to do anything with me. And at that time, they were taking planes from Cuba, and they were hijacking planes to Cuba. Another good reason to get on a plane with tons of, and I made it to New York. And I fell in with a group, and this group may have remembered the name of this. I ended up working for the guys that owned Studio 54. It was probably the largest discotheque ever in New York City. Great place to meet people if you're in a certain business. And from 21, my life just got worse. It's hard to say. I mean, I ended up with criminals. I ended up with the worst people. And I was a people pleaser. I have to be honest. So I fell in with them and wanted to please. So I would do more of the crazier things that they'd expect, and it was just a horrible existence. I'll only tell a few stories because I want to get to a recovery part. But, I was a bouncer at a club, and, I thought I was, cool because I took martial arts. And that's another thing. I had studied martial arts with some of the greatest teachers in New York, but because I was an alcoholic and alcoholism, I couldn't stand still for the katas. All I wanted was the black belt. So I could tell you I'm a black belt. And I went from school to school to learn to fight, but I didn't. And no matter what I ever tried to do, this disease stood in my way. I had the issue. I had the fortitude, but alcoholism, it was too powerful for me, and I remember that this guy was a big guy in a club, and he was talking to a pretty girl. And I said, why don't you pick, he was being nasty. I said, why don't you pick on someone your own side? And we go outside, and I thought I thought I got him, Well, he gets up, and about 15 seconds later, we're honest in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a broken ribs, cracked face, broken nose, hospitalized. And I met him 3 years later. I did not want to fight with this person. But when you start something and you're an alcoholic, the fear of backing down, it turned out he was a 3 tours in Vietnam, Green Beret commando, and his job was to teach the commandos how to kill. If you don't think my higher power was watching over me, this guy could have killed me. But that's alcoholism. The things that I did. And, this went on for 10 years. I had one good job. And when I rose to the top, I ended up going back to my criminal type of activities. And I remember I had a partner in this, and he was very influential because his father was a made man in the mafia. And I'm drinking, and we're going out every night. And because I was with him, I had carte blanche a lot. And then I got a girlfriend, and I wasn't with him for a while. And that's why I knew my higher power was watching, because he got shot and killed, and I was always with him. And, the last thing I could say, the insanity, I got into another business later on, and it was the white stuff. And I just am drinking, but I'm sitting in my house round the clock. And I get a phone call from the organization saying, a club owner in New York is going to turn federal and state's evidence. You do not leave your apartment. You do not go anywhere. Everybody's been notified. What does this alcoholic do? I'm the great Jonathan. Nothing. I am it. And after I finished business that night, I went to this club, hundreds of people outside because it was a fancy club. And I see 7 guys there and they're wearing, let's play this. Bouncers don't wear sport jackets, khaki pants, white socks, and chunky shoes. And they all have wires in their ears. And I walk up and I know that they're all looking for certain people. And I walk up to the front and I see the guy that owns the club, who he knows me because he's been at my house many times getting things. And I tap on the guy, testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2, because they were the police. How stupid, how can alcoholism, how can you, I could have been killed by the people who I work for. And what do you do? How do you go up to somebody who you know wants to get you and you just like go testing to see if they have microphones? Enough with this. Alcoholism, I'm sure every one of you has gone through something, but I just drank and drank, and I drank tequila because it was a cool drink and you did it with the salt and I drink cocktail glasses full. And where I ended up was I was in Fire Island with my girlfriend, and I woke up the next day and they told me they're throwing me and my girlfriend out. And I go, why? And they said, you blacked out. I didn't black. I had been in a blackout and I ruined a bar, tried to pick up the barmaid, and my 3 friends, I was a bodybuilder at the time, tried to grab me and I ripped their shirts off and they showed it to me. And they said, you got to go to AA. Well, I didn't. But finally, 2 months later, August 30th, I'm in the Hamptons. I'm sitting on a beach and I couldn't take it anymore. And that's when I know God intervened, because I had gone to the gym. I couldn't lift 5 pounds. I drank. Nothing happened. You drink a whole bottle and nothing drank. And I'm on this beach and I have no shirt on, no shoes, and I run off the beach. And I'm a big guy and there were no cell phones and I had no shoes on. And I run to this house in the Hamptons where I thought this girl was who would help me. And they're having a very fancy party in the Hamptons. And I run in there yelling, Betsy, you got to help me. You got to help me. I don't know what. And everybody is scattering and going to the left and the right. And I'm walking, and she says, I'll try to get a hold of Scott. And I am pacing back and forth, yelling, God, please help me. God, please help me. God, you got to help me. You see, that was the first time that God wasn't working for me. That's when God knew I needed him. That was when my ridiculousness of thinking God worked for me. And Scott showed up before the police did. He took me to my first meeting out there. They threw me on the back of a Harley Davidson, and they drove me into the city to a place that's fairly well known in New York called the 79th Street Workshop. It has 50 meetings a week. It's like a big clubhouse. They kicked me off this bike, and they told me to climb the steps and get your life back. And I was shaken. I had never detoxed. I didn't know anything about this. I went up the stairs. I came in the room. I looked at all you people. You were all happy. You're all this. And I was like, and some of these old timers you knew, and I'm sure they could tell I was new. They told me to sit down, and I sat down and I listened, and I just wasn't getting enough to want to stay, but I did because I was too frightened. And finally, at about 11 days, I was in a meeting at 6:15, and that was a very big meeting. 100 people would come. And there was a speaker up there, good-looking guy in a suit and a tie, and I'm looking and I'm shaking and I'm in there and I'm going, I don't know. And he says, hey, it's about time you got here. That was it. I don't know who this, how do you know? I get up in the middle of the meeting. I go to walk out, and I probably never would have come back. He said, don't you remember me? And I said, no, I don't know who the hell you are. What do you want? In the middle of the meeting. And he said, I was a bartender 3 years ago, and I was throwing a guy out, and his 2 friends jumped. These 3 guys jumped me, and you jumped in and beat the heck out of everybody. At that time, after that experience that I told you where I was working for that organization, I hid in a boxing gym for a year because I didn't know where else to go after I had screwed up so badly that I needed to be in a safe place. So I took up boxing. And I'm broke and penniless, and I see this guy getting beaten up. So I jumped in. What the heck? And he said, we partied that night, and you were too crazy for me. And at the end of the meeting, he came up and he said, listen, I know you don't know what's going on. I don't, but you got to get a sponsor. And that's when my life started, really. His name is Jerry. And I had embarrassed this guy when I was bodybuilding because he came up to me in the gym and I looked at him and he was scrawny and this. And I actually asked 2 women to come over and help him out. Jerry was a godsend. At 15 days, he told me to do service. I said, service? I don't even know what I'm doing. He said, go get somebody with 14 days. And while you're at it, clean the coffee cups, clean those coffee cups over there. And he goes, sweep up, mop up, pick up the ashtrays and get busy. And then we had a list of meetings to go to. And I started doing service and I started getting hooked in. And at a certain time, he said, you got to get a coffee commitment. And there was this huge meeting in town. And there was a guy who wanted to give up. You probably can remember when you set up 150 chairs and you put out the big coffee urns and you put out the cookies. I mean, that was fun service. I didn't even know what it was. So I go to this business meeting and I told the chairperson, I got to have coffee. He says, Jonathan, don't worry. I think the guy wants to give up the coffee commitment. Just wait. We got to get the overalls. And there's 40 people at this business meeting. I couldn't wait. I jumped in the middle of the floor because I was crazy. And I said, I got to have this coffee commitment. So the overall said, does anybody mind if we switch the rotation tonight? We're going to do coffee first. And they all said, yes. And they said, all those in favor of Jonathan getting coffee, raise your hand. Well, I got that coffee commitment. And for 1 year, it was my coffee commitment and I loved it. And I've been doing service for 39 years in AA, anything from institutions to everything. It saved my life, but at 90 days, my sponsor said, it looks like you know how not to pick up a drink. And it looks like you know where to go when you're in pain, but you're never going to handle this insanity. So he got me into the steps. And that's when, again, my life changed. And he took me into the first step. And it's not the one you have to practice perfectly. Yeah, I had a practice that I'm powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. So I could understand that I can't drink again. And I had to do a lot of work on that. I had to make sure that I just didn't say, well, I can't drink again. I had to do this work. And when he handed me into the second step, he had me do 15 things that I was doing insane and 10 that I was still doing since I came in. And that's when things lit up. I looked at the 15 insane things I was no longer doing. I was no longer smuggling. I no longer carried a gun. I no longer was in emergency rooms getting stitched up. I was no longer in violent confrontations, hurting people and hurting myself. I was no longer scared to death out of my mind because that's who I really was. And I tried to scare you with big and this, but I was no longer doing that. I was no longer frightening people. I was no longer doing all these insane things, losing friends to horrible deaths that are just not, they're not sicknesses, people getting killed, in what I was doing. I was no longer doing illegal things. And I looked at that and I said, this is only maybe 5 months. And the things I was still doing insane, I'll probably get to it, but my sponsor told me to burn my 4th step. And I burned it in my apartment and the fire department came because I kept feeding it paper after paper after paper. And I didn't realize whatever my sponsor said I did. And when they came and they realized it was just smoke and left, I still did it again. That would be insane things still doing. But then I got to the 3rd step and I did not. Oh, I've changed my 2nd step. The definition for me is that if I'm an alcoholic and I'm not working the steps, I'm not calling my sponsor, I'm not helping other alcoholics, I'm not praying, I'm not doing service, that's the definition of insanity, because I will go back and do some of the things I told you. When I got to the 3rd step, I wanted to turn everything over to him. I wanted him to be my higher power. He said, he gave me a pamphlet that was AA approved. God is the senior partner in a firm and you're the junior partner. You show up and do 100% of the work all the time. I could do that and then turn it over. So I started showing up and doing everything and expecting nothing. And believe me, I take my will back. And then he added the 3rd step, prayer. And the beautiful thing about this is I didn't know that, it was happening, but I started to get, promises, the 3rd step promises. I had a new employer. He was providing what I needed. I didn't know anything about that, it was like I could face life, starting to face life. I didn't know that these promises were coming true, but they were. And then I got to the fourth step and I did the inventory, I did the columns, I did everything. And then I went and I sat down with my sponsor. And I said to my sponsor, is there a statute of limitations? I thought my story was so bad that he would fire me. And I think he fell asleep, after I went through my thing, but my sponsor was loving, and one of the things that I got out of the fifth step, not only is in the book tells me if I don't do it, I might drink, but you see, I look like the most gregarious, outgoing, social person. I was the most introverted, scared, low self-esteem person. And I started to come out of my shell. I noticed I started to say hello. I started to become human. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't really know how to do that because if you did anything, I was in a defensive stance most of the time. I was frightened. And I went on to my sixth step, and it's Pagel's, pride, anger, greed, gluttony, and lust. Well, my phone went off, and I thought I had turned it off. Pride, anger, greed, gluttony, and lust. And I learned one thing about the sixth step. When I am frightened, when I get scared, I will go to my defects. When I'm not going to get something I want, something I earn. And my number one defect I know is anger. I have to be very careful with that. And I had to learn these defects and I had to be aware of them. And I have to be here with you people and doing all the work and service and everything, or I'm not going to be aware of them. And sometimes I do act out on them. And I try not to act out, too badly. I mean, over the years, I got better and better. In sobriety, I caught 2 muggers. That's about as violent as I've gotten. And for me, that's a pretty big thing in 39 years. And it was a good cause too, but it was, it was just the only time I really ever lifted my hands. And when I got to the 7th step, humility, Bill said, it's about getting rid of defects, humbly on our knees, ask God to remove our defects, holding nothing back. I had to ask God to remove my defects, but I still have to do the work. I have to do service. I have to do different things to become a better person. If I'm in Central Park rowing a boat to the island and I say, hey, God, can you get me to the side of the boat? He's going to go, hey, stupid. I gave you 2 oars. You row, I'll steer. And I have to learn humility by doing a lot of good things because I came with a twisted ego, low self-esteem, fear, and my number one defect is anger. So, I mean, I really had to do a lot. And I have a lot of sponsees and they helped me more. And I did a lot of service. And I kept on doing this no matter how successful I became in business. Doesn't matter. AA was first. Don't argue AA with me. I'll help anybody. And when I got to the A step, thank God I had a good sponsor because the A step was only a list. And boy, he crossed off a lot of things he did not want me near. And he said, if you get any money in there, you don't even touch it. And you don't let them come give it to you. You tell them you don't owe them. You don't owe them. I said, Jerry, some people, well, they don't owe you anything. You don't want that money. You don't want them near you. And I'm glad he did. And in the 9th step, which he taught me how to make amends, what to do, there's different ways. I was fearless. I wanted to make every amends, but he was very clear to tell me not to hurt anybody. And I went out there and there were times where I could have made an amends. And I said, wait a minute, that's going to hurt that person. But then I had to make an amends somewhere else. I never got out of anything and I didn't try to. And, I got a lot of the 9th step promises. They were coming true all the time. And then I got to the 10th step and I love that step because it comes a time where between me and my higher power, well, what about those promises, in the 10th step about putting in a state of neutrality in a fit spiritual condition, recoil from alcohol like a hot flame, that feeling of not wanting to pick up is just sort of natural. It's not, you're not fighting it anymore. Those were, and of course I did the inventory. And in my inventory, it always showed fear, 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 positive, negative, fear, fear. And I had to learn that I had to depend on my higher power more. because fear was false evidence, really. I wasn't having enough faith in God. And then I look back and I see what everything he's done. He's kept me out of trouble, kept me out of jail, kept me from getting killed, and that went on in the 10th step. And then I do a spot check inventory all the time. And then we get to the 11th step. Meditation was funny. I thought I could meditate because I have attention deficit. So I went but my sponsor says, "Oh, you can't meditate? You mean you won't meditate?" So I went to the steam room at the health club and I start breathing into the steam. And after a few months, there was nobody in the steam room and I didn't know it. And I continue now with meditation. And what I've said to many people, as an old timer might say to somebody and might not get the best reaction, if I told you I give you $10,000 and you're going to get a raise, or I'm going to give you that girl's number that you want, you wouldn't sit there for 10 minutes and breathe in and breathe out. You can't do that? You can do everything else. Okay. And I would say that because I learned that there's almost nothing I really can't do if I'm asked to do it in AA. Not everything, just the principles and the things, in the book, I think it's on in the beginning of the book on page 18, talks about this as if you have cancer, it's a horrible disease, and there's not repercussions except to the person, to the family, and people feel sorry. But it also says that this disease is different, what it leaves behind. The family, the lying, the financial instability, it's just horrible. And then it talks about that if a person who has the knowledge of this program and is willing to, he can approach a newcomer and he can try to help them. But if the newcomer can't grasp that, it stops there. I keep on going with the newcomer. I just keep on trying. But I get now to the 12th step, and also say in the 11th step, I don't know what God's will for me is. Sometimes I think I know all the answers and God changes the questions. I got to the 12th step, which is one of my favorites. Having a spiritual awakening is a result of these steps. And that's the fuse that plugged into me. And I carried a message to alcoholics. I'm a very big 12-stepper. I'm a very big go after sponsees. I also don't, when I have a sponsee or I have people who slip, I'm not one of these people who waits for them to call, or I try to stay with them and let them know, look, if you don't want this or whatever, I'm going to be there. You can call me. I answer phones all right. My service commitment for the last number of years is I take phone calls in New York till 5 in the morning. I get a lot of people who've slipped and they say, you're the only person to call. I said, we're here. AA's here. It talks about when Dr. Bob said in his, in the back of the book, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, he just said, if people don't want this, intellectual, they find excuses. He said he feels sorry for them. I hear that, but I'm going to keep always trying to help the newcomer. I got a call the other night when I was answering phones for Intergroup from a guy who's first time, never asked for help. And I think he's still drunk because I called him, but I still got to try. And after the 12th step, my life started. It started to build. I became successful. And I used to thank God every day for it. I couldn't believe it. And then around 16, 17 years of constant service and getting more successful on the inside and the out and growing and becoming a man. And I got struck down by my childhood stuff, and I got it took me like a bottom, like at the beginning. And I had to get on a plane. I flew out to a place called the Meadows for Survivor One series, people who have been incested and violently abused. And until I had worked on that, even though AA kept me as happy as I could be, I needed to work on that. And I came back from there. I did psychodrama for 2 hours every night. I went to Al-Anon. I got a sponsor, went through the steps there, had even sponsees. AA was still my number one platform. And my weeks were AA, Al-Anon, therapy, AA, and I worked. I flew all over I don't know how I did it. I know that AA gave me the power, the strength, and the courage. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. And 2 years later, I started to heal from that. Now you put the power of the Alcoholics Anonymous, what I did, and now I'm becoming more of a whole person. And today I'm happily married. And I kid my wife and I kid people. I don't need my wife at all. You know, that need, I don't need it. I want my wife. I love my wife. And that's how I love my wife. So I need her, but I first have to love her and want her and be intimate with her. And that's what all that work has done, to be intimate with you people, to be intimate with men, to realize nobody's a threat to me. And that is a beautiful thing. And I had to do that extra work that was not AA related, but how would I have gotten the strength and the courage to do that unless AA gave that to me? Because I was so entrenched in AA all the time that when the time was right, I did it. Now, here's what I'm going to say how I know that AA works. You know, when things are going great and you're in a doing great and things are well and you're working, you know, I'm going to talk from that end of it. You know, what happens if you're on top of your game and you get sick? At 55 or so, I got 8 cancerous lesions across my stomach, and they had to come off. And 6 months later, my hip, I had to get replaced. It completely collapsed. And 6 months later, both knees had to be replaced. So that beautiful job, I had a very big job where I only took people, I sold kids clothing, but I was really a vice president and ran a large division and traveled all over the United States and made a lot of money and had to give it up. No golden parachute walk out. And I'm still in AA and I'm still doing everything and had to do more and as best I could. And then I had 2 more surgeries, shoulders, I had this, I had a staff. I mean, it was really, you know, but the Jonathan, when the doctor said, you know, you might want to answer phones or chair a meeting, I took the overall at the workshop. That's taking over the whole clubhouse. And to show you how crazy I still am, there used to be somebody who would take toilet bowl, take a roll of toilet paper and flush it down the toilet just to flood the place. And I am crazy as the overall. I went and bought one of these big, you know, what do you call them? These things that would undo the snake. And I walked into the biggest meeting there and I put it up in the air and said, who's ever doing this, make my day. Crazy, stupid, but I didn't like anybody messing with the AA rooms. But anyway, I kept on going and kept on going and kept on doing what I could. And I watched myself change from this big, powerful guy down to, you know, it was hard. And I had to learn how to handle and accept life. And AA did that for me. And then 2020 comes and I wake up with back surgery, February 29, 2020. And that's when the pandemic was. And I woke up, back surgery, the world collapsed, and so did my back again. They brought me in under the COVID protocol. They did my back again. And I wasn't getting better. They under my shoulder ripped. They had to do my shoulder. And things were going along, and I was getting another back surgery. And I'm getting reduced smaller, but I'm still trying. And then I get a kidney stone so big, I had one surgery, and then they had to go in through my back. And of course, they cut my kidney. And I'm laying there, and they have to decide if I can take another surgery because it's been 36 hours. And when they take the x-ray, they find an aortic aneurysm. And I look at it like this: God loves me. Because how do you know you have something like that? They found it before it. When you get one of that and it happens, I looked at it that way. That's how AA had me thinking. Yeah, am I the happiest man in the world that all this is happening? I've told my sponsor, I said, if I ever tell you that I'm happy, everything's happening like this, take a gun, shoot me, because believe me, I'm upset, but I have to learn to handle it. And after that and 3 eye surgeries, another back fusion, you know, I had to learn how to accept what's going on. I had to realize I've had 39 wonderful years and I hope to have more years. But you see, AA works. I didn't even say the most basic thing. I never thought of drinking, never picked up, you know, anything, never thought. And the only time I was ever really sad was I guess maybe only Claire knows. I had a little 4-pound teacup poodle, little black and white poodle this big, and she was my baby. And I bought her for my wife, but she became my dog. She slept with me. She was my baby. She talked to me. I talked to her. And when I had to put her down, that was the most painful thing I've been to. But AA is still going to be there. And I have to deal with losses. I didn't get out of life free card. And as I said before to the beginning of this meeting, I got sober off the back of giants. These old timers kept me. When I was in the room in the beginning and my sponsor was here and I'm sitting there and they set me up and a group comes down, and maybe some of you old timers will laugh at this. I'm sitting there in a chair and my sponsor's there, and two guys come down and go, he goes, I hear you're sponsoring this guy, Jonathan. Well, we're going to help you if you need it. And I go, I'm Jonathan. My sponsor's okay. I don't need you. And then another group comes down and they said, we're deciding if, you're going to handle this on your own. And they're doing this to me at the beginning of a meeting. And I didn't realize this. And then they get the last one that comes down. This was the best one. He comes down. He looks at me and he looks at my sponsor and he crosses himself. He says, God bless you, Jerry. You're doing a miracle taking him. I mean, this is what these guys did to me. And you know what? I loved it. They cared about me. They knew that they had to ruffle my feathers. They knew that if they could keep me laughing and crazy. And then if I would say something, they'd say, there's another meeting that needs the floor swept. And I ran there. I'm sorry, I ran there. I didn't get the great life I had today by sitting on my butt and not doing the work. So they said I didn't get out of life free card. So I'm going to, I don't need to take up all this time. Probably at around 35, 40 minutes. I'm going to say you can see what AA has done for me. I may be physically in pretty bad shape. I have a wonderful wife. I have people that I love, people that love me. I've gotten through just about every experience that comes my way. I think you've heard that. I've got 3 surgeries lined up. I have a nice home. As a matter of fact, I used to do service at the workshop. And I used to bag coffee, 240 bags a week. And people would say, I said, you don't understand how much fun I'm having. I had newcomers coming in and helping me. And they say, oh, you're getting your hands dirty. One girl said, when you first came in, you were mopping the floors. I thought you were the maintenance man. And she was really snide. And I didn't answer her negatively. I said, you know something? Do you know where I live? You see that building over there? The one I live on very high up. I can see the planes land in LaGuardia. I can see the East River up and north, and I live on a high floor. There's 3 gyms, there's 3 everything. I said, do you know how I got there? This place, the 79th Street Workshop. If I would clean this place with my hands and nails. This place gave me my life. I don't get places like that unless AA. So if you think I'm the maintenance guy, be my guest. I'm the maintenance guy, but this place is going to stay clean because you need a nice place to come to, because this is where the health is. It's here. It's not out there. It's here. So I think when God showed up that time when I was out in the Hamptons, and all this time I thought I was asking God to do me favors, and he was up there. Oh my God, he must have saying, Jonathan, I got to move you to the left or you're going to get arrested, or Jonathan, you're going to get killed. Now he said, it's time. It's time. And I think, you hear this about being pulled out of hell. I think he just grabbed me and he said, look, and he said, Jonathan, here you are. I'm going to give you a chance to stop drinking. You can do this lightly. You can just go. You may not drink at all, but you're not going to get life. There is a program called Sobriety, and you can get it. And if you put everything into it, you give your heart, your soul, your mind, you follow these people, you may have a life that right now I can't tell you. It's your choice. Well, was it take this lightly or sobriety? I chose sobriety. So my name is Jonathan. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic and drug addict. Moise, I thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to share my story with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I knew he had a story, but right from the start, I got identification. Unfortunately, I was involved with people I shouldn't have been involved with. And because I was a people pleaser, I done things, depending on who I was with, is what I do. I became a pure animal. There's no glamour in my drinking. There never was. I took a drink, the drink took me, and that's the end of the story. And I was left with horrendous amounts of guilt, shame, and remorse. And that's what got me sober, was I couldn't live with me anymore. I couldn't live with the pain of being me, and I hated me as well. I spent 4 years going in and out of this fellowship. Would not recommend that. But the last time I came back, I was lucky. Someone came up and bullied me into the program, told me exactly what to do and how to do it, and promised me a life beyond my wildest dreams if I done what I was told. And it's changed everything for me. Today I can look at myself in the mirror. Today I love myself. Today I love others. You know, I'm 36 years clean and sober. I'm still married to the same woman. I have a great relationship with my kids. I have a fantastic relationship with my grandchildren. And my life is full of love no matter where I go. I'm surrounded by that love because of this fellowship. And you hit on so much of your story, even in sobriety. The reason I'm living where I'm living is because of this fellowship, because I walked into the right place at the right time. And I'm blessed that my daughter lives one side of me, one of my sons lives the other side, and I live in the middle. And four of my grandchildren are living with us. It's just a beautiful way of living. And there's nobody chasing me anymore. I'm not looking over my shoulder. And I don't have that fear and dread that I always had. Instead, that's been replaced by love, laughter, and just a life. So I thank you for joining us this evening. And like you two, I'm in service since the day I got sober. I'm in service since the day I got sober. I was told what to do. And, you know, as long as I'm in service, I'll feel a part of. Take it away there, Mick. And if I have to run, I'm waiting on my pharmacist to come with medication for my wife because I'm going back to Spain tomorrow. And he screwed up the whole thing there today. So if you see me legging it out of the room, take over, Mick, because I'm going out to the pharmacist. Thanks.
Right. Well, my name's Mick and I am an alcoholic, but grace of God and this fellowship don't need to take a drink. Okay, Mossy. Jonathan identified so much with it. You know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous thinking alcohol was my problem, and it wasn't. I was the problem. You know, I identified with lots of stuff like you were sharing, you know, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, you showed me how to get well. Because I joined thinking, you done it for me. You done it. Got me sober. But it didn't work like that. That they, you know, and I had a wonderful woman as a sponsor to start with, wonderful, but she justified why I felt like I did, and you know, why I felt like I did, and I thought, well, I've heard of this bloke called Jack of Slough, which is a little a town near where I live. I'll talk to him, and he became my sponsor. And if I said yes, but he'd say, I'm not talking to you. You know, you're trying to get out of it, and he was right. You know, but what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is everything. I had a wife of Al-Anon for 40 years. You know, and you know, we used the program to repair our marriage and learn to love each other. And 10 years ago, she died. You know, we would have been married 56 years today if she was still alive. And you know, and through this program, I didn't need to take a drink. You know, because it's not what I lost, it's what I gained. And that's what everything is in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's what we gain keeps us sober, not what we lose. You know, we gain so much love for another person, you know. And in our area, you used to start at the bottom of the ladder and you grew up the ladder in service. And that you didn't volunteer, you were told, you know. I've only ever volunteered once, and it was a 5-year commitment. All I wanted to do was, on a convention, sell some raffle tickets. and they whopped a 5-year commitment on me. But I learned from it all. You know, this program has given me a life. because you told me we suffer from a dis-ease, not disease, a dis-ease of the mind. You know, and I know what my mind's like. Thank you all for being here. We've come to the end of the meeting, and Rachel G is going to read the promises.
The promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not.
No.
They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks, Hazel, for doing the preamble. Thanks, Mick, and everyone else in the co-hosting.
And you.
And Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today. An amazing meeting. Karen, I will send you'll be the first one to get the recording, and I'll be asking you questions the following day about it. Okay?
Yeah.
That's it, Mick.
Right. We have a meeting on 7 days a week at 8:30 a.m. UK time. We also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. This is a meditation meeting.
And on Saturday, of course, we have the Old Timers meeting, an extended share recorded for the archives. And Thursday evening, we will another meeting at 7:30 p.m. UK time. We use the same meeting codes for all our meetings.
Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want a breakout room after the meeting, please ask the host.
And the yellow card. Who you see here?
What you hear here,
When you leave here.
let it stay here.
That's it, folks. That's a wrap. And Jonathan, will you lead us out with the serenity prayer? And thanks again for joining us today.
Close with the serenity prayer.
Yeah.
God,
Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom
The difference.
I will not mind be done.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. An amazing chairman.
When's Claire speaking?
Thank you, everyone.
The
Thanks,
27th.
everybody.
The 27th.
27th.
Yeah.
That's 3 weeks from today.
Saturday the 27th, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Claire.
Oh, my
Bye,
pleasure,
everybody.
Jonathan.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Bye.
all for being here,
Bye.
keeping me safe.